Hey, welcome back to the Grimdark Garage, 40K Fanatics. We're here, me, Casey, and Shane here as well.
Casey, when was the last time you dug a hole with a shovel?
Oh gosh, dude, I don't think it's been years. Why do you ask?
Twice this week for your boy. And let me tell you, I understand that the backhoe has put a lot of people out of work, but they didn't need that job. Party foul, party foul.
Sorry, folks, my phone was not on silent. I meant to do that. That is my bad.
Shane check's phone is
Yeah.
on silent. Oh, point for me.
That's okay. So today, talking about Tyranids, folks. So be ready for this.
Do you dig them out of the ground with a shovel?
Well, no, they pretty much dig themselves out. If I'm being honest.
We've
So
got another lore pod for you guys. Be sure to rate and review. We're available now on all the various podcast apps. I hope you guys are enjoying the show. There's a YouTube channel as well, 40K Fanatics on YouTube. Leave a comment. Tell us what you think. How can we improve? What did we get wrong? We're here for a good time.
yeah, we're on Spotify, we are on iHeartRadio, and now we are on Amazon. Actually, I just checked a few minutes ago.
Ooh, very exciting.
Yeah, I'll show you the screenshot. It's great.
Which I think the timeline's messed up because doesn't this come out 2 weeks from now?
It does. So that timeline is now thoroughly messed up. But like 40K, everything is retconnable.
Am I too soon?
Too soon. Yeah. Anyways, so we're talking about Tyranids today, the Great Devourer, the beasts from beyond the stars. Shane, you know anything about these guys?
I know very little about these guys. All of my Tyranid knowledge is going to be based on how much of it has been ripped off from Aliens and Starship Troopers. And I am to understand that it's quite a bit, which is good.
Yeah, the Tyranids are really, really, really deadly. I mean, not only are these things parasitic, they're cannibalistic as well. They adapt to any strategy you send after them. They adapt to pretty much any environment you send them in. You don't want to fight these guys.
They've got the hive mind thing going on too, right? So
Yes, basically, these guys travel in hive fleets, and these hive fleets are all connected via a hive mind through larger creatures. They institute the will of the hive mind through these larger creatures to control the smaller ones. Basically, if you're in a battle, kill the big bugs because then the little bugs will just be like dogs.
right, but even if you kill all the stuff in whatever battle you're in, so all that sort of battle data is getting uploaded to the big
Tyranid hive mind, yes.
yeah.
So these are not local boys. The Tyranids have come into the Milky Way galaxy from, as far as 10th edition, they will come in from four different directions now. So far, everything has been on the eastern half. They've come from the bottom, the side, and I believe the top of the eastern fringes of the galaxy. These are not local boys.
No, do we know anything about the origins of the Tyranids, or are they some mystery bugs?
So there are a lot of theories, but there is actually a Necron overlord, and Necrons existed billions of years, pretty much before humans even existed. And he told the Necrons to sleep, and he left the Milky Way galaxy. Now, this is from him through via a lieutenant because he doesn't talk. Anyways, to summarize, there has been nowhere outside of the Milky Way he did not encounter the Tyranids.
Oh, they're everywhere, huh?
So the going theory is because they have entered from just about all these different directions, we may be surrounded, folks.
Wow.
Yes, it's not a great situation. And this is why I believe Tyranids are a much bigger threat to the universe than Chaos.
Yeah, and the Tyranids are going to be getting the spotlight in the new 10th edition too, right? Because all the graphics, all the literature so far have been Space Marines v Tyranids, whereas last time in ninth, I think we had Space Marines v Necrons.
100%. This one is going to be, we had Necrons versus Space Marines, and we had Death Guard versus Space Marines, and now we're going with Tyranids versus Space Marines. So basically, Tyranids travel in these vast hive fleets. They are incapable of faster than light travel. They basically use like slingshot, use gravity wells from planets to travel.
Now, do the Tyranids have spaceships or what?
They have bioships.
Ew.
Every single thing in the Tyranid arsenal is living. It is all connected via the hive mind. Their ships, their guns, their bullets, everything.
Meat cannons.
Yes, they'll like some of their weapons shoot actual grubs that will literally go into you, burrow into your body, and then evolve into a larger Tyranid the size of a dog and explode out of you.
That doesn't sound familiar at all.
Basically. They're called flesh burrowers, I believe. Flesh burrower bullets. But basically, these hive fleets or are comprised of hive ships that carry the Tyranids from place to place, and they are living, each carrying something called a Norn Queen, which breeds the Tyranids. Once they arrive to a planet, they connect these large tubes down to the surface along with their spores. The spores will basically soften up the matter and make a few Tyranids. While that is happening, some Tyranids will basically shoot straight down to the surface with these spores and connect the tubes and defend them. Once they have connected to the planet, the spores will soften up the earth and convert it to biomass. They'll put it around these acid pools next to the tubes, and the tubes will send them up to the hive ship.
So they're just sucking off the whole planet.
They want to eat they want to nom your face and everyone you know.
Wow. I mean, just the people, or like you make it sound like they're eating the ground
They
and everything.
eat everything. I mean, they will throw your ass in the acid pool. They will throw your neighbor. They will throw a tree, a rock, whatever. Once they are done, they leave the planet a lifeless husk of a rock. And the last thing to go into these acid pools are the Tyranids themselves.
Oh, really? They get recycled back into the thing.
Basically, so that the hive mind and the hive fleet can further use the biomass to adapt and evolve for the good of the Tyranid race.
Wow. That's not a lot of culture to cover in this lore video.
There really isn't. Tyranids have characters, but not real characters like you or I know them, like Gilliman or the Lion or the Emperor. They're really just individual Tyranids that have popped up every now and again and serve the will of the hive mind.
Yeah, they're like they're like the gatherer ant or the queen ant or whatever, right?
Basically, the biggest one of all is the Swarm Lord. So if you ever see a Swarm Lord, it is basically a hive tyrant, which is the general of the Tyranids. However, the Swarm Lord is unique in the sense that if the Tyranids are losing, the hive mind will spawn the Swarm Lord to replace the hive tyrant, and then the Swarm Lord will change tactical adaptations to fight the battle.
Does the Swarm Lord have a model?
The Swarm Lord does have a model.
I love a model.
Wow, it is wicked. You
Is it?
have to see this model.
Describe it to me, because I am
It's-
not up on my Tyranids.
If you see a Tyranid, imagine a giant space bug. They're even called the space bugs of death. Big carapace, purple back, horns and stuff coming off it, 4 claws, large spiked tail, hooves, feet, and this guy has 4 bone swords on his hands.
Nice.
They have actually killed the Swarm Lord in the past, but when that Swarm Lord dies, if they are not quick to exterminate the Tyranids, they'll just spawn another Swarm Lord who will go back into the fight, learning from the previous fight, and then destroy your forces.
I see. Now, the Swarm Lord is a hive tyrant, and a hive tyrant becomes a Swarm Lord, or are those two different things?
The going theory is that they recycle the Hive Tyrant to make a Swarm Lord because they don't need a Hive Tyrant anymore.
I see. And does the hive tyrant have a model?
A Hive Tyrant does have a model, and they're really good. Honestly, you want to go for a winged Hive Tyrant if you're going for a Hive Tyrant. I learned that the hard way. Bought a $12 Hive Tyrant off eBay, and then no one wanted it when I tried to resell it. So get yourself a winged Hive Tyrant, guys.
They fly now?
Of a lot of Tyranids fly. That's the thing about Tyranids. Their adaptations are so wicked. Like they will send wave after wave into a whole ice planet to invade it, and countless Tyranids will die before they start sending in furry Tyranids or Tyranids with subcutaneous fat to make them live longer. And they do this on the fly.
So these are a mix of your Starship Trooper bugs and the Borg from Star Trek.
Basically, except Tyranids are not intelligent in the way that humans or Eldar, maybe even orcs are. They don't communicate with us. They don't talk to us. They have no will other than serving the hive mind. Once the hive fleet has gathered all the DNA and biomass that it wants from a planet, it moves on to the next source. And the funny thing is, in the first few Tyrannic wars, these hive fleets have learned from the strategies that they have fought and split into splinter fleets, smaller forces that can attack other planets and grow in size. So they're not having to fight huge wars that they might lose and take a bigger loss. Now they're more adaptable, and these split up hive fleets or splinter fleets can grow bigger to the original size of their original hive fleet.
Does that end up in the game giving us sort of different sub factions for Tyranids, or
100%. There's so many mainstream Tyranid hive fleets that you can play. There's Behemoth, Leviathan, Kraken. Then there's the sub factions like Gorgon, Tiamat. I mean, there's so many different adaptations of splinter fleets. Some of these guys have adapted to chaos.
wow? So, correct me if I misunderstand, but I mean, there doesn't seem to be a ton of lore with the Tyranids because they don't do anything but eat. So, don't the Gene Stealer cult dudes worship these bugs?
Yes, and the Gene Stealer cult is a fantastic bit of lore. If you want to play Tyranids and not just solely Tyranids, you can play some Gene Stealer cult guys with them.
Yeah, I mean, because this seems much more sort of flavorful. So, how do we end up with
A Gene Stealer cult?
a Gene Stealer cult?
Gene Stealer cult is basically a Tyranid bioform called a Gene Stealer. This Gene Stealer will say in a battle of ship to ship, the Imperium fights a hive fleet and destroys it.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they don't thoroughly scan their ship, and on the outside is a Gene Stealer that has been attached by some kind of pod. Okay, so this Gene Stealer stays on the ship until maybe that ship has gotten close to a planet. They'll s- sneak their way onto the ship, find their way into a box or something, get shipped down to the planet, and then find their way into, who's to say, a mine or the underhive of a planet, and they'll hide secretly and find unknowing victims. And have you ever seen the tongue off a xenomorph, the mouth, the little mouth that pops out of a xenomorph mouth?
Oh yeah.
They'll basically pop one of those out and attach it to a human. Say it's a human, and this human's DNA will get forever changed, and this person will become more amorous and feel the need to reproduce.
Oh no.
So it gets a couple dozen to 100 of these people over time. People will literally bring others to this gene stealer.
To have a big bug man orgy.
Yeah, more or less. Like it can vary, but then once he has enough victims, he basically goes into hibernation and transforms in this hibernation into a brood lord.
Okay.
So the gene stealer will grow to almost the size of a hive tyrant, which is effectively the size of a tank.
Sure.
And this gene stealer will become a brood lord and use its psychic connection to these individuals to kind of sway them or control them. And they see him as basically a god and wait for their worshipped gods to come save them.
So is the Broodlord attached to the hive mind of the Tyranids at this stage?
Yes, during this hibernation, the hive mind of is connecting to this brood lord through a psychic beacon. He's calling the Tyranids to this planet while the cultists who worship this brood lord are reproducing.
And as they reproduce, they're becoming more and more monstrous, right?
Yes.
Because at this stage, they're living underground around the
Yes.
pod,
Basically.
growing tentacle arms and stuff.
Yes, and the first generation usually becomes like a mix between what a gene stealer looks like and a human would look like. A purple skin, rigid forehead, long tongue, the grotesque mouth, multiple limbs. It looks almost like a gene stealer, just with a few human characteristics. After that, the next generation will appear more human, but with ridged forehead, maybe a third arm or something, sharp teeth. The generation after that will pretty much pass for human, barring the occasional maybe I have pointed teeth, whatever. This fourth generation will, and maybe the third, will infiltrate mining facilities, army barracks and forces, political positions of power, and they'll slowly seed their ways into society while preaching maybe a new way to think, getting people who aren't in the cult to think, hey, there's somebody else out there. Why am I working myself to death for the Imperium? I can literally be free.
But all the while, it's just sounding the beacon for the Tyranid hive fleet to come and eat everything.
Basically. And what's worse, this fourth generation that actually passes for human, their children are gene stealers.
So at that point, then everybody just starts birthing bugs.
Imagine popping that out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it doesn't sound very different from the chest buster bullets you were talking about.
Basically. And while these people are slowly building up the cult, this could go on for hundreds of years.
Right, because the Tyranid hive fleet is slow.
Exactly. They don't have warp travel. Eventually, the Tyranid fleet will reach the planet, and that is where the shadow in the warp comes in. Have you heard about this?
No, I have not heard about this.
The shadow in the warp. See, Tyranids may not have warp travel, but they do have a psychic presence. Something called the shadow in the warp that obscures. Before they get there, basically, the shadow in the warp will shut off all psychic connection. If you're a psyker, say with the Astronomicon that communicates to Terra from this planet, or maybe you're a person who's a navigator showing a ship through the warp, that ship will drop out of the warp into real space. Or if you're an astropath on the planet, you will have no connection to anyone else outside. And if you try, usually you will go mad hearing the voices of skittering claws and teeth.
Oh, so this is like one of the last signs that your planet has been taken over by the Gene Stealer cult?
Basically, but this comes when the Tyranids appear in the system.
Oh, right, when they're getting real close.
Yes, so not only are the Tyranids about to be there, they haven't even gotten there yet, and you can't call for help. And maybe you are somebody who knows what this is, and then you don't know what to do because you can't travel to call for help or get help from anyone.
Well, and at that stage, too, you're already fighting a war with the Gene Stealer bug people.
Yes, and that is when they get in system and the shadow of the warp appears. The cult thinks their star gods are there and that they are there to get their chosen people and bring them to the afterlife and deter the shackles of whatever government is oppressing them. So basically, they believe Jesus and his angels are here. It's Armageddon. Let's fight on the side of the angels.
So the Gene Stealer cults are Mormon?
More or less. So they will use their positions of power to shut down defenses, take down loyalists, whatever have you. Shut like any way that you could think of getting away, they'll probably shut it down.
Is there any? I mean, all that sounds very complicated and nuanced. All for the Tyranids to just come and eat the thing.
Oh, it gets worse. When the Tyranids arrive and start eating things, they fight on the side of the cult for as long as it takes to establish the acid pools. And then they take the Gene Stealer cult, put them around the acid pools, and then throw them into the acid pools. And as you are about to hit the acid or dissolving already, they cut off their psychic connection. And then you realize all the horrors of what you have accomplished and what these creatures are around you because they see them as gods and angels.
Wow. I mean, it just seems wild that on one hand, they live to eat, they slowly run around and chew up stuff. And then on the other, they have the ability to have this infiltration system that can be very complicated. And then it's just for more eating at the end of the day.
Yeah, basically, there have been 3 tyrannic wars so far, and 10th edition just announced a 4th one, coming from the complete opposite end of the galaxy, by the way.
Has there ever been an instance where the cult gets wise to what's going on and rebels? I mean, that seems like an interesting story.
No, there haven't. But there have been some who've actually gone off planet and started interplanetary relations to infect other planets because they just had the idle time to do so.
Right, because if I guess if the pod attaches to a ship that travels the warp quite far, then it could be eons before the Tyranids actually get there. Yeah.
Yeah, or a cultist could just crew a ship that goes to a nearby planet. It's crazy, I swear. On top of all of that, the Tyranids have done some insane stuff with their tyrannic war. I'm just gonna hit off a few things. They have basically devastated an Eldar craft world, which is a ship the size of a continent. They have adapted to chaos, a whole hive fleet literally dedicated to fighting chaos because chaos don't have any biomass. These Tyranids use predominantly ranged warfare and have developed their own psychers to fight chaos. And you've got the Shadow of the Warp nullifying the psychic effects. And when they run out of biomass or run low on their hive fleet, they actually call another hive fleet to reinforce them and give them more individuals. And then I've got another hive fleet. They took over a planet where they can be as big as titans, bigger than skyscrapers, basically. And Warlord Titan fought for Tyranid, basically the same thing as a Titan, and fought them very valiantly, held off the entire hive fleet, in fact, until these four things attacked them like attack dogs, and then it went nuclear and suicide bomb these guys, and like I don't want to say saved the whole planet, but basically saved the whole planet.
Wow. I mean, yeah. So
These guys gave the Ultramarines a gut check.
yeah, I mean, what is the Imperium's answer to the Tyranids? Because I mean, we haven't been overrun yet.
Yeah, so basically the Space Marines hold the line against the Tyranids, while orders like the Ordo Xenos of the Inquisition research them, and the Magos of the Adeptus Biologus of the Adeptus Mechanicus basically research their DNA and trying to find biological ways to fight these things. But the Tyranids are so vastly quickly adapting. A lot of this stuff, even if you manage to use a bioweapon on one hive fleet, there's no guarantee it's going to work on another.
That is wild.
The Tau actually made a bioweapon. These scientists from the Tau injected themselves last second with this bioweapon because all hopes were lost. The Tyranids were at the gates. They injected themselves, the Tyranids ate them, and the whole hive fleet died. The Tau still lost, but now the hive fleet's dead.
That one hive fleet.
Basically, any victory won against the Tyranids is a Pyrrhic victory. A victory where the losses and devastation are so vast and incomparable, you may have well just lost.
That is something else. I mean, it's interesting. I like to think about the kind of army that I want to play, and then sometimes I'm surprised about the kind of armies that others want to play. And the Tyranid player, I always think is an interesting sort because they don't get all the lore and they don't get all that epic stuff that we get, as an orc player or as a chaos space marine or as an Imperium player. It's just check out my spiky boys nomin things.
On top of that, I think that they surpass a big problem some armies face. Like they come into the mainstream and basically say you've got Abaddon from Chaos, for example. He's done these 13 Black Crusades. He's lost almost all of them, but they come in and say, oh, guess what? It was secretly all a victory. The Tyranids are there to basically give a gut check, to be the punching bag or the challenge against an army. And people still love Tyranids. You still respect the Tyranids, even though some people hate on Chaos for weird stuff, similar situations.
Yeah.
Losing just doesn't seem to affect the fandom on this faction.
Yeah, well, it's interesting too. Like you talk about the characters in the range of the Tyranids. I mean, they're characters, but they're not really. Like there's one Abaddon, there's one Harkin World Claimer, Herald of the Apocalypse. There's one you know, Lion Johnson. Uh, but there's a whole bunch of the Tyranid characters, I guess. Like every Hive Fleet's got a Broodlord.
Yeah, you could,
Or
and they're not even really
whichever
characters.
it was.
Hive tyrants
Yeah.
or Carnifexes. They have a vast range of different bioforms for different needs. You want Tyranids to take out tanks, they've got them. You want Tyranids to fly, they got them. But the characters themselves, they don't have a personality because they're monsters.
Well, and they're not like the representative. They're not the representation of an individual either.
Exactly.
Like, you know, there's one Abaddon. This big Tyranid is like, well, here's a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Basically. There's one Abaddon, there's one Gaskull, there's one Commander Farsight, but there's like a Hive Tyrant or a Swarm Lord, and they don't have a personality. They don't represent the faction because the Hive mind really is the character for these guys.
Well, and narratively, that becomes interesting too because there's something too when we play a game. If you manage to kill Abaddon, well, Abaddon died last time we fought, which obviously I'm gonna use him again next time.
Exactly.
But with the Tyranids, you don't even have that sort of ethical dilemma of, yeah, no, Abaddon's back because new timeline.
Yeah, and I mean, Tyranids just show up to ruin your day or make a faction in 40K look more impressive, but you still respect the Tyranids, which fascinates me.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a horde army. Like you end up with a whole bunch of little skittering dudes in your army list, as I see it.
Mhm. And on top of that, they are not just an external threat, they are an internal threat. You got the Tyranids from the outside and the Gene Stealer cults from the outside. They've been found even on Holy Terra itself.
Oh wow.
Yes, and that is just amazing considering how highly defensible Earth is, also Terra, by the way. If you know Earth in the lore, you know there probably is no way of sneaking on, and these guys have done it. So it's crazy.
That sounds like an epic boarding actions game too. Tyranids versus Imperium down in the sewers.
Yeah, and that's why they came up with this new Custodes model and a few new Tyranid models recently. I think it's like the Blade Guard or Blade Smith or Blade Champion or something like that. On top of the Tyranids having like I think one new model, but they're getting a whole lot of new things. They're revamping new models and giving their or old models and giving them a new design. They're taking basic models. Honestly, I don't think the Termagants need to have a new model. They look cool as it is, but they're getting it.
Those are the little Velociraptor looking dudes, aren't they?
Basically, they're the foot soldiers, the dispensable meat fodder of the Tyranids, basically.
Yeah, what's the maximum size of that unit? Like 30 or something crazy? Like you could just have so many of them.
Oh gosh, they are such a horde thing. I've seen like 20, 30 mobs of them. They're like orcs. Just take a bunch of them and just throw them at something. So, to me, Tyranids represent a much deadlier foe to to the universe than Chaos does because they've not only adapted to just about any faction out there, but also Chaos, and they don't care what they do. They're here to eat the entire galaxy, good guy, bad guy, in between. They just want to kill rather than chaos.
Yeah, and that's interesting too because like all the Chaos gods have got some they all have some agenda that they're trying to make reach, and then they've got your Chaos cultists who are just people that are along for the ride. Obviously, you have your true believers, all your you know Black Legion, but the Tyranids just want one thing, and there's no negotiating with that.
They basically just want to eat your face.
Yeah, I mean they're here for the buffet. You're like buffet's closed. They're like, we'll see.
Now, there has been something very recently in the lore that has changed. Basically, a splinter fleet of the biggest fleet so far, called Leviathan, attacked the home planet of a Space Marine chapter called the Blood Angels, where every single Blood Angel successor chapter, including the Blood Angels, joined together to fight this vast splinter of Leviathan. Now, it acted different because Tyranids go from planet to planet, soaking up as much biomass as they can. This one actually skipped planets or half ate others and just kept heading straight for the Blood Angels.
Finding the biggest threat and going at it.
Basically, they think that they were after something in the Blood Angels' DNA.
Oh, to then further their own sort of evolution.
Yes, and there is actually a unit in the Tyranids called the Hive Guard, which protect the Hive Tyrant or the Norn Queens or the leaders of the Tyranids. And it's been speculated that the DNA and the anatomy are very similar to certain super soldier characters in the 40K setting. And, maybe the Space Marines redacted. But basically, they think that the Tyranids may have eaten some Space Marines and made their own model with that DNA.
Well, I mean, there's no doubt they've eaten some Space Marines. See any old tabletop bat skirmish.
I mean, they've eaten entire chapter homeworlds. They've decimated entire chapters, eaten whole chapters. They've took their planets. I mean, it's the size of the Emperor. We're only left with like, I think 40 Space Marines out of 1,000. So take what you will with these guys.
No way to stop them.
No way to stop them. Really, they're unbeatable. And here's the thing, Shane. These just might be scouts. Yeah,
Oh, that's exciting.
these just might be a forward vanguard scouting the Milky Way galaxy before the major threat comes in.
Maybe we'll get some Forge World giant Titan bugs.
Yeah, and with the early release of the Tyranids back in the day, they actually released a Space Marine model called the Tyrannic War Veteran Squad, which were just Ultramarines who were good at fighting Tyranids, and they looked dope. And as you've probably seen, there's this new Space Marine model who's the lieutenant in Phobos armor. He's got like some Tyranid bits slapped onto his armor to help him out. I really like this model, and I hope they bring back this faction.
Well, and they're talking too about like a jungle setting, right? In 10th edition with the Tyranids. I've seen that rumored, and I think that'd be cool, because how many battles are we going to fight in the midst of tall ruined buildings?
Right, and I mean that could even lead to a faction like the Catachan Jungle Fighters and the Imperial Guard getting new models. It could lead to a lot of things. So we're hoping that with 10th edition, while the Tyranids get a lot of updates because some of their models are looking a little aged. I'm not gonna lie.
Gene Stealer cult too.
Gene Stealer Cult 2. We're hoping that with all these new rules and all these new factions and battles, maybe we'll get a lot of really positive updates rather than negative.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine how sharp Games Workshop can make some Tyranid bone swords these days?
Man, did I tell you about the Hive Tyrant's bone swords?
You did.
I did.
You did.
Okay,
But I can just imagine Games Workshop plastic actually being able to cut you.
yeah. I mean, you play Chaos. You probably had a spike or two go under a fingernail.
They're very spiky.
I mean, you probably stepped on a guy and thought, "Damn, did I just step on a Lego?" So
Knock on wood, I have not stepped on any guys. No guys have been harmed yet in my hobbying.
yeah, and we're looking forward to some great models. I honestly am. I think 10th edition is going to be awesome.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it. I mean, they spoiled the Termagant data sheet, and it had a neat thing where they could just move in the middle of you doing stuff, and I think that's fun. Just more reactive stuff is going to be fun in 10th.
Yeah, I'm excited, and maybe Leviathan will actually win a little bit. We're seeing these trailers, and we're seeing some star maps, and we're seeing a few planets get blipped off the Imperial map there. If you haven't seen that yet,
I haven't seen that. Let's hope that 40K Fanatics podcast doesn't get blipped off the map before next week. When we talk again, what are we talking about next week?
I think we're talking about the game next
Back
week,
back
right?
to the game, yeah.
Yeah.
I hope you guys enjoyed last week's podcast on what the game's about. I think we're going to talk about what it's like to play in your first tournament. Me and Casey both have played our first tournaments just real recently, and a lot of the negative stuff you hear about tournament play, we experienced absolutely none of.
Yeah, there's going to be toxic people in any environment, but honestly, I think that 40K has probably the most positive community out of any community I've ever been a part of. But we've been lucky enough to avoid the neck beards, as most people like to call these individuals.
Anyway, that's for next week. You guys don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on all of the places that you like. Tell your friends. rate and review. Leave comments and let us know how we're doing, what we got wrong, and whether or not you hate our faces.
Yeah. Thanks for the love. Appreciate, subscribe, like, and everything. Check out our YouTube channel and stay crazy, you 40K fanatics. See you later. Oh, and also, Grim Dark Garage says goodbye.